Autonomous induction theory, the critique. Now, autonomous induction theory is definitely an improvement on input processing that Van Patten talks about. Although the focus is slightly different and this model is more complex, however, there are certain sort of limitations of this model. So, some of the theoretical limitations are that it neglects the detail of language processing. Yes, it talks about language processing, but it does not tell about how the language processing takes place. Then again, in these processes, it also does not talk about the specific processes that actually convert the language that is out there in the environment in the form of input that is converted into intake. That is also not explained. How is it interpreted by the learners? That is also not explained. Now, Carroll challenges the claim that increased comprehension can lead to language acquisition in a sequential manner. Now, think of Krashen again and remember Krashen's input hypothesis and think about the emphasis that Krashen laid on comprehensible input on the learning of or in the learning of the second language. So while Krashen argued that the learners actually learn a language if they can comprehend the messages that are coming to them, Carroll challenges and says that comprehension is not possible until and unless there is some sort of language that the learners already know that facilitate that kind of comprehension. For her, it is logically impossible, and there are several others who agree with this critique. So Carroll argues to make comprehension possible, one would need a formal analysis of the language that is coming to them, but that kind of analysis is hardly undertaken by the learners, especially when the stimuli or the language that we are talking about is the spoken language, because there's hardly any time for the learners to actually try to delineate or break up the different parts of the utterance and try to interpret them. And to think that just by giving them this input, they will be able to speak the language or use the language is incorrect. So, what is the relevance of all this for our classroom practices? If we think about autonomous induction theory in general, what is it telling to the teachers? Autonomous induction theory is talking about the importance of enabling the learners to make their own generalizations about the language. For instance, if we talk about grammar teaching, Carroll would say, or this model would say, that instead of giving them a principle or an example of how a structure of a sentence should be, we need to give different examples to the learners and then enable the learners to formulate their own generalizations of how the correct structure of a sentence should be and how does it function and how does it convey meaning. So don't begin by giving a principle and asking them to practice it through different examples like we often do in our language classrooms, but to give them examples and enable them to come up with a principle which might be correct or might not be correct, but which can be discussed in the language classroom. And according to this autonomous induction theory or model, it will facilitate the learning of the second language in the classrooms.